found this person, Amala Ekpunobi, and she's definitely part of the right. She's definitely part of the conservative group. Sometimes she calls herself a conservative activist. She used to work for PragerU and is now again independent, but still making similar content, is from her away message. So any PragerU branding on this one was because it came out in June 8th, 2023. Why am I watching this video? So I've recently started to investigate this idea. I want to sit down with a data-oriented conservative. And what do I mean by that, and why do I want to do that? So why I want to do it is because your greatest kind of validation and credibility and understanding of truth comes from when you push your ideas out into the world and get them like feedback from them, reflected back, right? Not affirmation, but in some ways attacked. And that's what I want to do. I want to find someone who's doing that, but I can't argue with a person who's going to say dismiss all science credibility. I can't argue with a person who's going to dismiss numbers and what those indicate. And I can't argue with someone who's not going to have the nuanced conversation that some of these things matter. Because for instance, if one person is saying that discrimination is the only source of disparity, right? Well, that's claiming 100% that all disparity is due to some kind of discrimination. And that doesn't pan out. But if another person is saying that there is no discrimination inside of the system in which we live, or enough amongst people in order to create a system-like or system-wide discrimination of some degree or value, that's also not true. We even saw that just in the previous video where it was talking about pronouns on a resume. There's definitely discrimination there. It's not as big as people may feel like it is, because it only takes once to be discriminated against to identify that as a big issue. It only takes a couple of times for a person to dislike or disparage a group of individuals, right? So I really wanted to sit down with someone who would look at that same data and come to different conclusions and talk about why. Or more importantly, not even why, but what solutions might be useful going forward. I'm hoping in part this documentary turns out to be something that is illuminating to thought processes, data oriented like that, and it works in place of that ability. I had a bunch of commenters on that previous video who, some of them started off with an assault, an aggressive attack. They dialed back. I had to give them space. I had to ask questions. And I was very thankful for their willingness to participate in the conversation, even if it was happening just via texts on a YouTube video from some nobody like me. I can't even begin to tell you how hard that is to do in real life. Anyways, that's my hope. We're going to watch this and we're going to find out where it goes.
The first time I heard woke, I thought it was something positive, that you were awake to what was happening and that you were fighting the white male capitalist who had the whole world set up for himself. And you were gonna be the activist who brought the whole system down.
Amala interview, take one.
My name is Amala Ekpunobi. I live in LA and I work for PragerU. At this point in the 2020s, woke is everywhere. On billboards, in entertainment, in sports, on our clothes.
Okay, hold on a second. I need to figure out what she means by woke. So that first part is a little bit of a mixed bag. She said woke is basically being awake to, we'll just say discrimination overall. That does come out of the Black community from way long ago. Well, not even that long ago, like 100 years, right? And that you'll be the activist who takes it all down. Okay. And so I'm only doing this research on the history of the word woke to just kind of get a beginning playing field. Like, where did we start and what has it become? because this is a big part of this documentary since it's called Unwoke, right? So it started kind of, it looks like, well, it came into popular use at least after a song, the Scottsboro Boys, which is talking about where 9 black teenagers were accused of raping 2 white girls in what is seen widely as one of the worst cases of racial legal injustice. So definitely being awake to ideas of injustice, initially around racial injustice. So in that idea, I think it's still a useful kind of call to arms of sorts, right? Like being woke, you want to be aware of discriminations in a system, whatever they happen to be. But it does make a case here that that's kind of not really how it's even used on the left so much anymore. And it's definitely been co-opted by the right as a point, right? You just sort of anything you don't like, especially if it's progressive, but anything you don't like, you just point at it and you call it woke and it's done, right? Like it's no longer popular. That's a call to arms for the conservatives to say, this is bad, right? And they don't have to say that's stupid or dumb or, you know, whatever. They don't have to come up with an argument. They just have to say it's woke, so it's bad. But social injustice does exist on at least a one-on-one basis in small communities, in small areas, even if perhaps Amala doesn't want to say that there might be some force of systemic discrimination. There is definitely still some social injustices happening. That's not very difficult to see. All you have to do is look at the variance in judges giving out sentences. And you don't even have to do it across the racial line. You can just say one judge might give over 7 years for a crime that another judge gives only 2.8 years to. You can find that information, just the variance and what that means in a book called Noise by Daniel Kahneman. Very good about analysis of bias in various systems. That's systemic bias. And he goes over a lot of different sources. So that'd be a great book for anyone who doesn't believe that there is systemic discrimination of any kind to go over. And then you can see how that could be applicable and understood as, in some instances, racial bias, right? Anyways, that book doesn't necessarily go over racial bias. It does go over how you detect bias and how you detect noise in systems. So it's a really good book for data analysts. All right, so these are mostly just saying, hey, this word had a lot of substance. And depending upon who you ask, it may have been for a long time. It may have been for, not such a long time that it's had that kind of deeperness. But for sure, of late, the last, 8 to 10 years, it's been both taken over by some folks in the left to sort of be, hey, we're presenting some kind of more superficial version of being awake, or almost a comical version of this, and then on the right as a point a finger at it and just sort of take it down, right? And then, of course, still in its normal use. So it's still being used in its kind of historical, regular use for racial discrimination that may not be aware of, but it's to be aware of it. It doesn't sound like anywhere it's really talking about being an activist to take things down. Not saying that that's not how it was used for her experience. Like she may have had that experience. Someone could have told her, hey, you're woke or stay woke because we're going to take this system down, right? That's possible. It doesn't seem that that's kind of the normally understood way in which it's used. But we're trying to figure out what she means through this documentary, and we're going to keep going. But it's pretty old, right? And 1940 is only part of it. There's even earlier callbacks. I've seen some places to the early 1900s, right? Okay.
On billboards in
Hold on, this gives us a better idea about what she's being.
20s, woke is everywhere.
Love comes in every shade. Okay. So she's talking about the presentation of, like in this case, it would be pro LGBT, pro interracial love. I guess I don't know what exactly the sign is specifically trying to say, but, love comes in every shade. I don't think that's a bad message. It's pretty tame.
On billboards.
Okay, here's more Black Lives Matter stuff. So I know that she's against Black Lives Matter. Defund.
In entertainment.
So we're getting some ideas here. We're getting pro love in any shade. This would be what? Gay love. We have Black Lives Matter. We have systemic racism, which will keep those things potentially separate because one's more like a movement or an organization. The other one's a kind of systemic discrimination. And what was the other thing? Defund the police. Okay. So another Black
on
Lives Matter.
billboards,
Sorry.
in entertainment, in sports.
Okay, so BLM in sports is also woke. All right, I'm taking notes on a separate kind of screen. Okay.
Sports, on our clothes, in our schools, and in our
Was that Drag Queen
sports,
Story Hour?
on our clothes.
So here's LGBT stuff in the clothing, which seems like that's... Is she saying that's woke? It just seems like a business catering to groups of people, right? I don't know. Probably, this is what, Target probably during Pride Month when they had to put things all the way in the back or whatever it was. Oh yeah, Target right there. Okay. Seems really bizarre. Just like if you don't like it, just ignore it. Walk past it. Do whatever you want. What's the last one?
In our school.
Drag Queen Story Hour. Okay. I think it's going to be a little too hopeful for a 17-minute video to go over pro love in any shade, gay love, Black Lives Matter, systemic racism, defund the police, Black Lives Matter in sports, LGBT clothing, and Drag Queen Story Hour, all how they're woke and how that's a problem. But here we go.
Schools and in our businesses. And I kept wondering, how did this happen? We all feel it, and the feeling isn't a good one. As someone who was once on the far left, I worry that we'll get... As someone who was once on the far left...
Okay, so that's presumptuous.
And the feeling isn't a good one.
We all feel it, and the feeling isn't a good one. I can argue that tons of people really like this idea that's going on. I don't really care what corporations do. Like, I'm never going to call, well, I can't say never, but right now I wouldn't call Disney woke just because it's featuring, different diversity cast and it has, more Pride Month sort of stuff. My guess is they probably still fund both the Republican and Democrat parties. My guess is that they still fight for pro-profits over everything else. My guess is that they still are like, you can look at these things. During one of the worst situations in China where a group of people was being investigated for humanitarian rights, they filmed Mulan, giving the local government right where the humanitarian crisis is happening, tons and tons of money for filming there. Like, it's one of those things, you can be pro Apple and think that you're, socially conscious, but then, for how many ever decades they were rated really low for green development. They help support like Foxconn, which has some of the worst practices for work, and would regularly go over there and make showcases of we're going to require them to do better work. We're going to require them to, right? So there's that aspect of these big companies where they're constantly fighting for and against just whatever happens to be popular so they can basically be ignored to do whatever it is they want and take over, basically our politics. And that seems more of a problem, right? Like, get corporations out of politics and we'll actually get to hear what people care about. There's a lot a lot of things out there. I would still rather have them regulated better and out of politics, though, right? Okay.
As someone who was once on the far left, I worry that wokeism is ripping our country apart. At PragerU, we have a slogan: don't just complain.
If anything, from this conversation, or from even the brief research, wokeism isn't pulling our country apart, it's bringing it together. Bringing it together in a very bizarre and outlandish culture war, but definitely bringing it together where people aren't really sitting down and talking about data anymore. They're yelling and screaming at one another for not listening to them when they yell and scream. Now, the data does play out to side with one of those groups more than another, but it's not the case that it's really defining us in that kind of traditional sense. I once used to say that, Clinton's adultery and everything did one thing really, really well in the United States, and that was get people talking about politics more, get people active in politics more. These kinds of disparities are making people become more politically vocal at the very least, but because our votes don't seem to matter, we're sort of screaming off into the ether, right? And Congress is enacting virtually nothing except for those things to be against people.
Do something. So?
Yeah, I can see that as being a great thing, right? Don't just say something, do something. It's even coming from a person who is a kind of influencer on one of the modern celebrities, right? So, wonder what she's going to do.
I began asking questions. Where did wokeism come from? Is woke here to stay? And are there alternatives to wokeism? So began what would become a journey across the United States to try to find those answers. And perhaps, in finding those answers, we'll find a way to end wokeism once and for all.
End wokeism once and for all. Is it here to stay? In the classic sense, I hope it is not here to stay, because you can only be awake to kind of the injustices that people aren't willing to talk about until the injustices go away. Now, maybe the good news for wokeism is if it's got that broader definition associated with it, then injustice is seemingly an aspect of governance, right? A large-scale governance will have some injustice to it. It can't be perfect, but there's still a lot of room to go. Defeating wokeism is weird to me, unless you're only using this kind of very superficial, shallow definition of the word that mostly has been a co-opt by the Republicans to, again, do a call sign, point at something, and just say it's woke, and that delegitimizes it, right? By the way, though, really great production, really great transitions. These are amazing, right? Like, this is a great, this is a great setup for a story, right?
So much of the talk around woke seems to be just that, talk. At the end of the day, nothing will change if those of us who disagree with wokeism don't take action ourselves. But to understand what can be done about it?
I now see the point. Okay, so this is not so much about educating on the history of woke and then trying to talk about the bad ideas about it. This is a call to arms, right? Like, get everyone together to do something about it. Let's listen to this pretty carefully.
Nothing will change if those of us who disagree with...
Here we go.
So much of the talk around woke seems to be just that, talk.
Right. So here it initially feels like she might be talking about the left. Oh, it's just talk. You're just talking about social injustices, but it's smart, right? It's not just talking to that piece. In fact, it's not talking to that piece. It's the primary audience at all. My suspicion is like very few people on the left are going to even watch this. If they did watch it, they would just dismiss it because they're going to call her names regardless of what she says, right? So that means that there's a blind spot for folks to kind of come in, right? The Daily Wire does this all the time. It's a blind spot. They give people words. They give people call to arms. Charlie Kirk does this. He like calls people together to, basically move forward. He gives them a path to sort of take control back in their lives and fight against essentially what many people consider 20, 30 years past liberalism, right? Like it's already happened. So we've just been living in this world where it's been okay. And we kind of got, I don't know, lazy in our discussions. The direction of the country was going pretty well for liberals. And I mean, to be honest, for conservatives too, generally speaking, lots of things were getting better in the United States over time. Maybe not fast enough, we could argue that. Maybe not for everyone at the same pace, we can argue that. But generally speaking, it was getting better for both liberals and conservatives for the most part in a direction, just not yet good for everybody. But in that direction. And this is going to say, we don't like the ideas that are coming out of that. We don't like the presentation of ideologies that are coming out of that. Not the actual inevitable results that occurred for a lot of people, right? And so don't just talk, do something, take back this control, which conservatives have been losing like over time. I think, yeah, so here you go. So this is kind of political ideology by year, right? So as conservatives and moderates are slowly losing pace, right? Liberals are gaining pace. And so there's a real fear, especially amongst, I would wager, conservatives, that, because when you combine these two, you're looking at a clean 61%. So where moderates and liberals can agree, conservatives don't even need to be in the conversation for the country to move forward if we represented the Congress exactly what the population did, which it over time, right, is going to continue to happen. So, of course, you need a call to arms to not only make sure that all the conservatives are similar and homogenous in their belief. So, they're going to be one issue voters. They're going to be more inclined to be that way. But they're going to be more inclined to circle the wagons around an idea that they may not necessarily agree with, or a candidate, for that matter, that they might disagree with morally or ethically even, or really don't like his view on women. But because he's the Republican candidate, they will circle the wagons, right? And they'll get behind him. So you have this trend, and it is slow, but it is steady. And if this were to continue, right, then you would pretty much oust the need for conservatives to be a part of most discussions, even when it was 2/3, of a vote that was necessary. Even if we made majorities 3/4 of a vote that was necessary, it's just been happening over time. And they want to reverse that course. So they want you to take action. They want you to get out and vote. And the more active you are, the more you vocalize, the more you talk to people, the more likely you're able to attract them into the group, because people will naturally just tend to go with whatever the culture is shifting to just fine, right? Unless someone creates resistance. And then there's an opportunity for them to kind of take things back. So today it is the conservatives being the activists, because I think they recognize this probably more than anybody else. But it also doesn't justify that a liberal or a moderate can just move forward with something without the data. I think we need to get in the habit that our culture isn't about just how people in the liberal, moderate, or conservative parties feel is the right thing, but what the data shows is a great or likely result or a great or likely answer to a current problem. And then that's how you make it so that you protect us from future swings like this, where we're just generally finally headed in a good direction more often than not. Anyways, so stop talking and take action. That's her talking point. Remember that. I'm going to do a Charlie Kirk one here. I know I keep saying that, but I keep finding all these other people who are more interesting than him. And he very much does this very well. Very well. I have nothing but compliments to say about his inspirational leadership style. And I have probably nothing but bad, well, not nothing but bad things, but mostly bad things to say about the direction in which he wants to actually lead people. Right? All right. So wokeism, bad. You can defeat it. The way you can defeat it is to not just talk about it, right? So don't just sit in your corner talking about it. Don't just complain with people, but get out there and do something. So vote, recruit, maybe yell at people. I don't know what the other forms of doing, but and then business, right? Clearly, because there's businesses down here.
At the end of the day, nothing will change if those of us who disagree with wokeism don't take action ourselves. But to understand what can be done about it, we need to understand the world in which it originated. My first stop was to talk to the man who literally wrote the book on woke. Here we are in Columbus, Ohio. The first questions: what is wokeism, and where did it come from? Hi, Vivek.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Oh, Woke Incorporated, right? That's why she's saying he wrote the book, wrote a book on it. Is this literally like the only book? Anyways, it seems like there's other books, but that these other books didn't make your list. But Vivek, right? Let's get back to that. He is currently running for president. I want to say he was about 7% of the last polling. He's very pro-Trump. He's basically Trump apologist. Some people think that that's because he wants to maybe be vice president. I think it's much more likely that he doesn't suspect Trump is going to be able to actually run. The court cases will plan out. So by being pro-Trump early on and standing by that president for regardless of the scenario, that he will get Trump supporters to vote for him to increase his likelihood of winning, where almost all the other candidates are yelling, they're infighting against Trump, right? So I think that's more of the strategy. He's been caught in a couple of like incorrect quotings of himself or of other things. One good thing that I can say about him from the interviews I've seen, he wants to get rid of corporate donations and super PACs. I think that is something that every party in every way, shape, or form should agree with, removing corporations from politics, from campaign financing, I would say even from advertisement, get news media organizations out of the debate structure. If you had Amala on one side and you had Destiny on the other, and they came together and came up with, like say the 10 questions that they were, they viewed their people to ask to get 10 questions. They surveyed them, got those 10 questions pieced together, right? And then they hosted presidential candidates from any which side, any two people who wanted to debate one another. And they hosted that with them bringing together the 10 questions, and they had done research behind the scenes, already had their conversation about them, already had their talking points for them, and had their ability to do fact checking for them, right? So unless something brand new came up from the candidate, they could do it. Then they could fact check right then and there in real time, right? You do like, here's your 3 minutes of conversation, DeSantis, and here's your 3 minutes of conversation, Biden, on this topic. And then we're going to fact check what you said in real time for the next 5 to 10 minutes after that, split the time between Destiny and Amala. And then boom, you have a group of people who are independent. Their viewers associate them with, in some way, shape, or form, some kind of truth bearer. Their viewers talk about them as being people who challenge the status quo. They get whatever incentive they need, which is the fact that they're going to be hosting a presidential debate, right? And that presidential debate would then win them a bunch of views, which is right then and there their monetary incentive. They don't need a separate one like news media organizations might. They don't need to host it. And they wouldn't let anything. You could just mute someone from a Discord channel or a Skype call or whatever it happens to be, right? Teams or Zoom or whatever you're using, right? You could mute them after their time ran out. You wouldn't have to let them carry on, and you could fact check them in real time. So anyone watching didn't have to wait an hour, 2 hours to see those fact checks and then have forgotten what it was, or you only see the fact checks of the opponent on your media versus the other media, right? Something like that needs to happen, and it needs to happen soon. He doesn't say all that stuff about the debates, just to be clear. That's my idea. His idea is just get rid of super PACs, which is probably, the grand scheme of things, actually much harder to do than my idea. I think if Amala and Destiny both got together and wanted to host a presidential debate today, they could. Without any permission, without any media organizations getting into them, it could just happen.
Meet Vivek Ramaswamy. He recently founded Strive Asset Management, an investment management firm that's challenging industry titans like BlackRock and Vanguard. He's doing it the old-fashioned way, focusing his investment decisions on excellence over politics. But before Strive, he founded a multi-billion-dollar biotech company called Roivant Sciences. They were literally working to cure cancer. Until, at the height of Black Lives Matter, his board and employees demanded Vivek speak out in full support of the organization and the movement. And he couldn't do it with a clear conscience.
But I stepped down as CEO.
So he left the company that he created. Because of this experience, Vivek wrote a book you might have heard of, called Woke Inc.
Okay, so he was still executive chairman of its board. He also did it to separate himself from Roivant's day-to-day operations, in part due to his increasing public engagement, because running for president and all. I mean, hey, at least there's this, right? He released 20 years of his individual income taxes online to reporters. That's better than some previous people, right? The fact that he says that he would pardon Trump if Trump were convicted of anything, that to me is problematic. Because if he's found guilty, you shouldn't be pardoning people. He's a civilian. At this point in time, even if he was president of the United States, law and order and all that, right? President Trump already did a bunch of that stuff, but it's clearly to cater to the Trump base in order to get that. He does indicate that that's just not something you do with presidential candidates because it's never been done before. But it's also in this instance because the crimes have never been potentially committed before, alleged, right? So that's where I wouldn't stand with him for sure, from the little that I know of him.
You think all stakeholders can be satisfied by a company just focusing on satisfying its consumers and its employees rather than maybe delving into ESG? It's kind of the anti-ESG you're launching, is it not?
Well, I find it difficult to be anti-ESG when I find it very difficult to even define what ESG means today. That the real problem is when that much capital is concentrated in one set of hands or in a few hands that are advocating for one ideology, we lack the true diversity of thought that the American economy depends on and that our capital markets depend on. So that's what we're hoping to fix at Strive.
I have a cat jumping around. So, I mean, it sounds like if he can't describe ESG, then what's he going against, right? I want to say it's like environmentally, socially, social governance, environmental, social governance. Okay, so here's the criteria, right? Environment. What kind of impact does a company have on the environment? This can include a company's carbon footprint, its abstinence from or mitigation of toxic chemicals involved in its manufacturing and other processes, and its pursuit of sustainability through its supply chain. So, okay, that all sounds good. So is this just giving a score and then people get to choose how they invest based upon those scores? Yes, investors, regulators, as well as consumers and employees are now increasingly demanding that companies should not only be good stewards of capital, but also of natural and social capital and have necessary governance frameworks in place to support this. So it looks like, because like these reports just come out, right? So they produce them. And you kind of get to decide, like, do I want to invest in this group or that group? Okay, so like if we were to turn this around, right? An ESG based conservative business, right, would be a group that might have like Christian values at the forefront, or might be I don't know what they would call it, like, not anti-trans, they'd probably call it something like pro-biological sex or something like that, pro-sex, right? Although that'd get them in trouble with the Christian views with those wordings. But, and then they might say that they were pro-life groups, right? So those are environmentally, social governance, and they would say that they're using the trickle-down method. So the reason why they're giving the corporate leader the most amount of money, which also still happens in, of course, liberal, supposedly allegedly liberal companies, right? They give tons of money to the CEOs because it's going to rain down. The more the CEO has, the more they're able to innovate and create jobs and generate businesses, and then the people below them get more money, right? But if a company was coming out and saying those things and doing those things, it'd be like the equivalent of a corporate ESG. So instead, I don't know what that would look like. Like, what would a conservative business that's not based on environmental, like their version of environmental social governance be, right? Like, it couldn't be promoting an idea. Would it just be neutral on all of these topics? Is that how it would work? Okay, let's keep going because Vivek's here, so I'm sure he's got some stuff to say. We're only 2 minutes in. God, I talk way too much.
You wrote a book called Woke Inc. I think a lot of people are going to hear that and go, what's woke? Mm-hmm. So Vivek, what's woke?
Yeah, wokeness refers to being alert to invisible injustices perpetuated against disempowered classes of people, generally defined on.
That's a pretty good definition for what we heard, right? Being alert to invisible injustices perpetuated against disempowered classes of people. Seems not the definition we got earlier, but okay.
Genetically inherited characteristics like race, gender, and sexual orientation. Basically borrows from the tropes of Marxism, which was this
here we go. Here's the twist.
Oppressor-oppressed narrative. But wokeism was not just Marxism. It was the merger of Marxism with identity politics. The idea that you are nothing more and nothing less than the genetic stock that you inherit on the day you're born.
This seems confusing. Identity politics is not about genetic stock. Identity politics is specifically about like social construction. And a lot of identity politics today is about what you take on yourself. Unless I am going crazy. Identity politics, tendency for people of a particular religion, ethnic group, social background, etc., to form exclusive political alliances, moving away from traditional broad-based party politics. Particular religion, ethnic group, social background, etc. Yeah, these are more or less like socially designed groups. So for instance, like a form of identity politics is that if I were religious, right, I could say that I'm a Christian. And because I'm a Christian and that forms some of my belief, I want to be able to do things like go out and feed the poor. I want to go out and be able to go to church on Sunday. I want to, not have to fight with my employer to take off certain holidays because they're very important to me in my religion, right? And we actually protect quite a few of those things in law. Partially because our Constitution kind of has freedom of religion, and that created a historical basis for it, but also like it's something we think of as good. We're not trying to get rid of it. We're not trying to get rid of that identity or that, group of people who identify as a particular religion. And I'm thankful for that because I'm an atheist, and there are countries out there still to this day where people have been killed for being atheists. And I shouldn't go to those places and proclaim myself as an atheist, which is probably pretty dumb to do on a video, right? So we live in a country where I'm free to say that, and I'm free to express those ideas, and you can disagree with me. And I'm just as protected as that person because those are part of our identity politics. And I'll make political decisions based upon my atheism. I will, because my atheism basically takes me into a place where I need data in order to orient myself towards what might be good. And so if there's not data for something, or if it's an unknown, then my first call to arms is not to necessarily make a big law or change or anything like that. It's to seek data to be able to determine if something might be good or bad. Now, if there are people in dire straits or need protection or who are suffering immediately, the goal ought to be remove that suffering, whatever we need to do in order to do that, in order to delay so that we can get data and identify what else we might do, right? And that's where it kind of defaults, is protection of people and their freedoms first and foremost, in lieu of any data that would say that it's harming other folks, right? Yeah. But identity politics, we've never not been about identity politics, religion and social definition and racial and class disparity. These are all social background, everything. They're all basically what politics has been for all of time. Well, at least recorded time. We don't really know before then, but yeah. Okay. But it's not the things that you inherit on the day that the genetic stock that you inherit on the day you're born. So I don't know where he's getting this from. I can agree that in part, a lot of people will view the world in the form of oppressed and oppressors, and they take those like 100% routes. Like if you're not oppressed, then you're an oppressor. And if you're not an oppressor, you're part of the oppressed, I guess. And that's not good argumentation style, right? That's a fallacy. Just because someone's not one thing doesn't mean they're the opposite in almost every situation, right? Just because you're not right doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong, or if something's not true, it could be that we're pending still more information, right? We don't know. Anyhow, this seems wrong, this part at the very least.
So that's what you sort of refer to as the trend of modern wokeness.
Okay.
Now, this is a fringe philosophy. I mean, this was a theory from the halls of academia, and it was a challenge to the system. It was an interesting set of ideas. Does it mean it was all coherent? No, not necessarily, but it was interesting.
So we know that this part's actually just like not necessarily coherent. We just read about how it comes out of the Black communities of old. It, was popularized in a song. Like that's not coming out of the halls of academia.
It was provocative. It was a different way of looking at human relations. It was an interesting worldview in some classroom at some liberal arts university somewhere. Mm-hmm. But wokeness at some point moved from being about being a challenge to the system to becoming the system. So to really
Interesting. Like we could potentially agree on this point, right? Like as soon as the word woke and wokeism got sort of co-opted and hijacked by both the kind of superficial group using the term and not using it for that understanding of discrimination, right? Whether invisible or not, staying alert to those things, and got co-opted also by the right and became just a trigger word to point people at and say that's something that needs to be dismantled. That's something that needs to be dismantled. That's woke. That's woke. That's woke. Marxism, it has served that purpose for many years. Communism, socialism, right? Any of those words, they could basically just say, oh, it's socialist, and then boom, they get everybody around it knowing that's bad. They don't even have to think about it, right? It's just bad. We can agree that has become the system. Today, if you talk to people on the right, they're going to use woke as a weapon. And if you talk to people on the left, some of them may be going, no, it actually means something, but another group of them are just going to use it as like a call to arms or virtue signaling, or potentially just incorrectly, right? Just thinking that it's a catch-all for good things, like gay marriage, as we saw in the early posts, right? That's good. And someone might call it woke to identify that as good. But that doesn't mean it's saying awake to discrimination. It's saying, hey, look, we finally got everyone awake to be able to celebrate this or whatnot, right? So yeah, it is being changed from the challenge to the system, but not by, I suspect, the people that it matters to most, right? It's still that challenge to the system.
Understand the origin story of wokeism, you have to understand academia first. That's where it was born. It was born as an infant there. It became an adolescent somewhere else, but let's start with the infancy. That's where it began.
It started in places with huge amounts of racial
the
discrimination.
rise of wokeism wasn't an overnight phenomenon. It's actually been in the works for years. So like many bad ideas,
Almost a century.
wokeism started in
Not longer.
academia. But why?
Wait, what was that?
Wokeism started in academia.
No, a little bit before that. I missed I was talking.
At the end of the day, the rise of wokeism wasn't an overnight phenomenon. It's actually been in the works for years. So like many bad ideas, wokeism started in academia.
Okay. I'm hoping that what she means, or she's going to explain this more, like what other bad ideas, but I'm hoping what she means is that there have been other bad ideas that have come out of academia. We can disagree whether or not wokeism is a bad idea. We can easily disagree that wokeism didn't start in academia, but let's assume we start at a point in which this version of wokeism that they dislike did start in academia. We start there and it grew into its adolescent existence. Then I'm hoping that what she is saying is that, like some other bad ideas, they got started in academia. Like we also have like an understanding of truth and justice and morality. We have Christianity and many of the ideas that it has very much filtered through what was then kind of academia and also modern academia. We have, and you know, like for their side, we have science and engineering, various kinds. You know, the fact that she's on YouTube or PragerU's website and being able to post these things is based off of all of these great ideas, or these ideas that came out of academia that allowed us to be here. Now, did some people from academia go off and do bad things? Yes. Do most people from any area go off and do bad things? No. And most ideas, we could probably argue this till we're blue in the face, but we could, because that's all anecdotes. But I would say most of the way in which we have formulated our entire country has been based on a lot of academics throughout time, right? So if wokeism only started years ago, then the vast majority of the ideas that came out of academia must have been good, right? Even if she's just talking about like philosophers and journalists and other liberal arts folks, and not including hard sciences in that, because maybe she disagrees that that's not academia or whatnot. But this is a hard point without any details. So if wokeism is the only example that she can bring to bear in this video about this, that's upsetting.
But why? And why didn't it stay in the ivory tower? How did this cancer infect every other?
These are key words. So do you hear this? Like she's saying other bad ideas. So academia is now bad, right? So they're clearly pointing as their enemies. So this is who their enemies are, right? You have academia. You have wokeism, right? But that's a catch-all for all of these other things. So I imagine that wokeism is a catch-all for everything. Marx, right? Enemy, clearly. You have ivory tower. So they're trying to position themselves as kind of the rebels in this, the ground, right? So they're the ones like in the real world, and the other folks are in, I guess, the Matrix now. Isn't it the red pill debate? So the ivory tower, we'll say ivory tower. What else was in there?
Area of society. Stay in the ivory tower. How did this cancer infect every other area of society?
Oh, ESG is bad. She said BlackRock in there, Vanguard. Ooh. Leftists. All right.
I needed to talk to somebody who understood academia and from a long-term, multifaceted perspective. And so I traveled to Washington, D.C. to talk to a visionary who did something many people consider to be impossible. He founded a new college that now rivals the Ivy League. This is Michael Farris. He started Patrick Henry College, a classical liberal arts college just outside of Washington, D.C. In only 20 years of the college's existence, Patrick Henry graduates have become leaders in the highest halls of power, including Congress, Hollywood, and the White House. And this sort of cultural impact was by design. Farris has been fighting wokeism before it was even called wokeism. And more importantly, he's been winning.
And I dare anyone to read my legal analysis.
Oh, wait. This is the guy. So let's back this up here a moment.
He's been winning.
So this is from a case in 2013, or not even a case. So there was a treaty going on for the disability rights and international laws. In this case, he argues on behalf of essentially the HSLDA, which is for homeschoolers, right? And people argue, yeah, there you go, HLDA, right? So he goes there to argue that essentially this international treaty, which was going to basically allow the United States to be spotlight for the ADA requirements that we have. So the American Disabilities Act was considered well beyond like what a lot of other countries did. There was 130 countries signed on to this treaty in order to basically say, we are going to propose that we're going to use this as a guiding light to make our own laws, to make lives for people with disabilities, including vets, right, be able to be better. And we're going to kind of solidify that. It's an aspirational treaty. He argued that no, this is going to make it so that parental rights gets decreased because he didn't like the language in the treaty. Through Senate committees, through conventions, through these things called RUDs, which get attached to these laws or get attached to these treaties, all would basically indicate that nothing would happen against the parental rights group. But because he wasn't assured of it, he raised a bunch of money, a bunch of capital, lobbied a bunch, and basically disallowed the United States from sort of, for once in our life, standing up for something more than just making a ton of money in the world and being able to help an international community. There's a whole thing on it. There's hours and hours of Congress stuff. He later denounced the Congress meeting by yelling and saying that they were being mean to him. But if you watch it, like, it is it is so tame compared to today's Congress meetings where people are threatening to kill one another or yelling or almost getting into fistfights, you know. And it is like cordial Southern gentlemen, like from the past. It is so calm and so dull. And I watched like this thing for like 4 hours. So in this case, he was actually kind of being a villain and a lobbyist. Like everything that Vivek is essentially standing against, corporations getting involved in big businesses or in government. So big businesses getting involved in all of these political things, right? So it's funny that those two characters are back to back, because Michael Farris and Vivek are essentially opposites. And then of course he started a school, which is the halls of academia. So, you know, another bad idea. But let's look up this Patrick Henry College. So, oh, surprise, surprise, right? Homeschoolers flock to this small Christian college. Interesting. Not at all, because, you know, the founder of it is basically the legal aid that allows them to do whatever they want in terms of being homeschooled, which is fine. I actually very much value homeschool when it's done well. It is fantastic. It is those are the students who actually compete on an international stage. Not sure if they would all be going to this school or not, or at all. But it's a Christian college. I'm sure it's private. What is it? Let's see what they say about how it stands out. It has an unwavering biblical worldview. So it clearly cannot have like sciences, right? Is there science degrees from there? Is that available on here? Environmental science and stewardship? Is this a liberal arts degree as well? It's about law and policy. Okay. So yeah, they don't have an actual like sciences curriculum. Do they have minors in it? Law, of course, law. That would make a ton of sense. Government, yeah, no wonder. Journalism, got to control media, right? Got nothing against classical liberal arts. It's fine, right? All right. Since I saw this, still putting it in my list of research links. Does anyone have any kind of rankings for it? God, I wish success ratings for every college was a requirement. It's got good reviews. I imagine it would. Anyone going to it's probably going to get what they get, right? What they were wanting. It's on the 20 most conservative colleges listed in America. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. It doesn't look like I can prove or disprove that it is similar or not to Ivy League schools. So we're just going to trust her in that fact.
Winning.
And I dare anyone to read my legal analysis.
Through Patrick Henry College, Mike is taking the battle against woke to the source.
So real quick, they did read his analysis. Actually, multiple people read his analysis, multiple lawyers, people from international law communities. He has some kind of international justice law degree. He disagreed with them, of course, but multiple people came out and basically said he was wrong and that he was overblowing any kind of concern, and that in fact there was no concern at all, not only due to precedent, due to the things we were putting in the treaty, and due to how we were signing the agreement. So every single thing about it was essentially safe for us and would still be amazing for our place in the world. So anyways.
By educating new generations of students in a rigorous, truth-focused education.
Truth-focused education. Okay. That I'm going to admit to it, that makes me a little biased because it's doing a collection of the biblical worldview. It doesn't have any sciences involved in it at all. It is only based on, law, classical liberalism, classical liberal arts, and essentially Christian worldview. So you've got religion, you've got old ethics and morality understanding, which can get you to logic and maybe some truths there, but none of the actual like modern day understanding of truths. Like what you really want, if you want political power, is you want teachers, you want media, and you want lawyers, right? Those are the three, and those are the three that Patrick Henry College, right, does. If you want actual truth and what the world is like and discovery, you want scientists, right? And maybe some liberal arts folks, maybe some lawyers, maybe some, to make sure that all that stuff works really well. But it definitely looks like they're building an army of media folks and lawyer folks, not truth finders. Okay, that's just my assessment, my argument against it. I can't prove that, but we do know that basically science up until this point in human history has been the best way of finding truths that are the most predictable and the most stable throughout time. It's self-correcting even, right? So like the scientific method is super advantageous, that even when science gets to a wrong point, there's an advantage that you use the same methodology to not only prove it wrong, but also move on to the next step, or into a completely different route. So like you can continue to develop as we have better understanding of the world and better tools and all these other things. Yeah, it's just surprising that the school doesn't have any of that.
Where do you think wokeness started? What's your theory there?
Where I was seeing it mostly was in the schools of education. They were teaching there is no truth, but what they meant is we're going to undermine the objective truth that you believe in and pretend that all truth is relative. And we're going to follow that up eventually with our truth. And that idea is now we're going to jam our truth down your throat and you better kneel. You raise a generation.
So that speaks a lot to the feelings of conservatives, right? Like let's rewatch this. So they had a worldview. Granted, from the videos, it's quite old, right?
That idea is now we're going to jam our truth down your throat and you.
So they saw the world as one way. They taught their kids that the world was one way, and then they were made out to be basically like either liars or the world was going wrong, right? And so their feeling
is now we're going to jam our truth down your throat and you better kneel.
That's what they're feeling. I mean, it's a valid feeling, right? Feeling the way a person feels is valid. And I can see where they're getting it from in some way, shapes, or form, right? I can't talk to if I speak up about any particular issue, there's a chance where someone's going to yell at me, right? And they're quote unquote on my side. But I'm also going to get yelled at by people on the other side. That doesn't mean I'm any more right or truthful, but it's going to make me less feel like I can come out and speak and discover truth, right? Make mistakes, fail in public. Yeah. That would be a bad feeling to have, right? And a lot of people feel like it's justified on the liberal side because they'll say like, well, that's how you made us feel for the past, 2,000 years or whatnot. Yeah. It's this complex issue. A lot of feelings on both sides.
You raise a generation that's told at the university that nobody can disagree with you. You take that attitude at campus, you think that's the way the whole world should be like, and that's what you believe. That's the way you were trained. And you will not be a friend of truth. You will not be a...
Love doesn't trump hate. It says love trumps hate. And we hope that, like, love wins out in the end. But to be really honest, love's way more fragile than hate, right? Hate has anger, and anger is a sharing emotion. It is something that they study in things like viral advertising and viral stories. Like, if you can make people mad, it'll share. But that's also meaning that they're a little bit less thoughtful and they're less kind, right? We're less open to other ideas. And this video so far is filled with a lot of generating of hate towards something. The words that are used are demeaning and despicable, not investigatory and curious, right? The questions she asks these people like Michael Farris and Vivek and whatnot, they're more curious, right? But they're really, tell me more about the people we hate. But to be fair to them, it feels like truth is being shoved down their throat. So what are they doing? They're getting mad, right? Because they're trying to form an army to fight against this liberal movement. And the liberals are getting shocked by this at every moment of every day. It's hard to make peace because you only ever need to make peace with people you're at war against.
Friend of freedom, you're going to be a friend of repressing anybody who doesn't follow the party line. The tyranny that's in place today believes that the heart, soul, and mind of man belongs to government. And that mantra has been taken up by big corporations and social media giants and so on. And that totalitarian impulse is the opposite of liberty or progressivism or anything, any of the traditional meanings of those terms.
We have a problem with big technology. We have a problem with big corporations. We have a problem with lobbyists. We have a problem with our politicians being donated to by large mega donating contributors that he represents and he's a part of. It's tough to sit in traffic and complain about it when you're a part of it. So this feels a little disingenuous, and it really only feels like these are talking points because it looks like or feels like his side isn't winning. If his side were winning, it would be the complete reverse, right? Like, oh, academia is great, school is great, all these things are great, because that's how it was before people were woke way back in the 1940s.
Our country was a liberal democracy. We're fast becoming a totalitarian, bureaucratically run country, not a democracy and not a republic.
That part I can agree with. Like I said, corporations taking over, they're forcing things down the road. Like in the same breath, one corporation might say we're out for social justice and then go do something in a foreign country that is inhumane, or might do it in this country and it's inhumane, or they might be like, we're for this kind of rights for this kind of people, or for women, or for whatnot, and they never do anything like raise their wages or open up their corporate doors for various people of different kinds, right? They don't change their practices.
We need to walk, we need to march, we need to shout.
Transgender rights are one of the most important civil rights movements of our lifetime.
And this is why people get mad, right? This is why they riot. This is why people get upset. This is like, it's not, you can't justify violence just because someone is angry or disagrees with you. But when there's no path, people will fight. And unfortunately, it's generally amongst the poor fighting the poor, right? And that's terrible. And we can pit people against one another in all sorts of varieties of ways. And those companies and the legal structure that keeps making that more possible, and doesn't really have to change much, right? Again, doesn't have to change much, and it continues on. Yeah.
We can enact change in this country.
The fight.
So you teach a generation that the truth is subjective and ever evolving. You brainwash them to accept no alternative viewpoints. It's the woke way or no way. And then you release.
Okay, so I guess that works if you're saying truth is if I taught someone truth is subjective and then I said it's my way or no way, the person might not get the cognitive issue there. So okay. Sorry, Amala.
Or no way. And then you release them into every industry of our society. Perhaps the most pernicious infiltration? The indoctrination tool for the masses. Entertainment. For years, everyday Americans have complained about woke Hollywood. But we're not here to complain. We want to create alternatives. So I decided to talk to a man who...
Not here to complain? Complained about academia, complained about wokeism, complained about. What else? ESG, BlackRock, Vanguard, just in general leftists. The bad ideas, drag queen story hour, LGBT clothing, BLM. Those are all complaints. And entertainment, by the way, like Hollywood was started to be conservative. I want to say like right after they got enacted to have free speech. Yeah, most people were apolitical early. I mean, Hollywood supported like Nazism basically. There was all kinds of like pro-Germany things. Yeah, here we go. Let's see what ThoughtCo has to say. Yeah, most studios were conservative Republicans who spent millions of dollars to block union and guild organizing, censorship, and scandals. Sure, the Hays Code, right? To remove any kind of objectionable content, investigate as subversive. And then in the Supreme Court ruling in 1952 declared films to be a form of free speech, and it started to slowly liberalize. So interesting, right? Like you give some people free speech off of the backs of a bunch of terrible conservatives, not all conservatives, but those conservatives for sure, right? Definitely they're going to liberalize.
Who is doing just that, creating an alternative to Hollywood and multiple other industries.
One type of woman gets to express her opinions and her views. That is not. Oh my God!
Wait, that's not the man we're talking about. That is. Meet Jeremy Boring. Jeremy is the co-founder of a media and entertainment company called The Daily Wire. They push buttons, they tell the truth, and they're working every day.
They definitely push buttons. Got a couple of videos on the facts about the Daily Wire, and I'm going to continue doing those. But Candace Owens, Matt Walsh, for sure, have a very low content of truth in any of their videos. They might start with a statement that starts with something that sounds like the truth, but then it very quickly goes off the rails. They do have a general news group, and in those, that contains details that you can say are truthful. But to basically blanket them as a truth-telling operative, that's not good. That's certainly not true. But as far as like entertainment goes, whatever. I mean, you want them to have like a conservative entertainment group who yells at a bunch of people, fine. Like that's freedom of speech, right? And you're going to have people who pay them money for that. And people need to be able to get out and get that out of their system. What's really bad about today isn't the fact that there are people who are doing that. It's the fact that there are people who feel so shut out of conversation and being able to dialogue and being able to have these like real interactions where essentially they didn't know that something was, hate speech or bad or wrong or incorrect data-wise. And now they're feeling empowered by these folks to fight and use those not as what they might be, but instead what they are being told it is, which is a truth-telling mechanism, right? Ben Shapiro always quotes that he gets yelled at by both sides, so that means that he's doing something right. That is not a sign of doing something right. It's not a sign of necessarily doing something wrong. It's just a sign that what you say, a lot of people can disagree with. Go Daily Wire.
To create both news and entertainment that is free from liberal bias.
In many ways, big media has become just a propaganda arm of the left, and Daily Wire wanted to correct that.
Welcome back to the comments.
We've produced written articles, news articles.
Still biased.
We've produced podcasts. We're the fifth largest podcast publisher in the world. But beyond the Daily Wire, we've expanded into something we're calling Daily Wire Plus.
So look at this. This is amazing, right? Like, they're empowering conservatives, and they're doing a multifaceted, multi-directional campaign to do that. It's very smart to get to the end result, which is this fight. They want to have the war because they've been training for it.
and it's really a broader cultural entertainment play. We're making movies, we're making television shows, we're making kids entertainment, which I think is probably the most important fight we will ever take on.
They've also started making some pretty awesome products that offer an alternative to woke companies and other industries as well.
Jeremy's Razors is a consumer goods alternative to companies like Gillette.
Apparently it
Harry's
competes
Razors,
with Harry's Razors. They had a
embrace
falling
the
out.
LGBT agenda.
But Dollar
And not
Shave
just the
Club still
LGBT
generally
agenda.
gets better reviews.
The radical gender theory being pushed on
That's fine.
children.
It's new, whatever.
Daily Wire Plus, 1 million plus paying subscribers right now.
We'll ignore his comment about the radical gender theory because obviously we're on a conservative documentary and that's their belief. And that's a much bigger topic to go into on maybe some other video.
At Jeremy's Razors, we have sold over 100,000 razor subscriptions. I think all of that is because the half of the country that up until now has been divided by nothing, they've had no alternatives whatsoever, are eager and hungry to engage with those alternatives.
I mean, I'm pretty sure there's been other conservative brains out there. I mean, Lobbies, Wednesdays, Mosaic Company, ExxonMobil. I mean, none of these are razors, right? Let's see if there were other conservative. Get Your Shave. When did they get founded? The 1776 starter kit. See, that's some smart marketing, right? You just immediately see like the person who's buying it or the people who would be for it. Look at this, Freedom Forged, shave with freedom. It's almost like freedom fries, right? Like Christian roots. We're under attack, buy from us so that we can help. I bet they also donate too. See, that's another thing. Like a lot of these companies are really gaining a bunch of capital to donate to all of the causes that, you know, as a liberal progressive, I might really dislike, because we're not putting our money there anymore and we're growing in number. So this kind of stuff helps them solidify that money. It's a really smart campaign, and I don't think it's directed by any one particular person or group of people. I just think it's a cause that so many people care about, and then there's some people who are pulling out of that to lead and make a ton of money. Like Charlie Kirk is a millionaire, and he still says that Turning Point USA is a nonprofit organization, even though they raise millions of dollars, right? It's like FIFA being a nonprofit organization, which is just ridiculous. But it's smart. It's utilizing all of the tools that they have in the country in order to have their propaganda message beat out other people's message, right? Anyways.
When they're presented, especially if we're not exploiting them, if we're actually providing value to them, then I think that there's enormous opportunity.
It's a fine razor. People can buy it. It's their money.
Hollywood going woke is pretty easy to see.
If companies didn't have power to wage political wars, I wouldn't care, right? At all. Buying candidates is the problem, not people making money off of sharing a brand that proposes Christian roots or patriotism, right? Fine. That's not hurting anybody. Go forth.
Coming. But what happened next, no one expected. Sports went woke. See that guy standing while everyone else is kneeling? That's Jonathan Isaac. He plays for the Orlando Magic in the NBA. He also happened to be one of the few NBA players who publicly expressed discomfort with supporting the Black Lives Matter movement.
Like really well done.
This all came to a head when the players on his team decided to collectively kneel during the national anthem. So he did what he felt was right. He stood.
And in all honesty, he should be able to. I hope he didn't get fired. I hope he didn't get canceled. None of those things for standing. If you want celebrities to be political entities, they should be individual political entities, not an organization. People could disagree with him. They may not like him. They don't have to be his friend. But just like no one should have been fired for kneeling, no one should be fired for standing when other people kneel. It's freedom of speech.
Now, Jonathan is launching his own apparel company called Unite Us, in hopes of bringing people together over love of God and country.
Unite Us.
I hope that they're not. So this is another problem I have with corporations in the United States, is that we give them the ability to be essentially a barrier between the person who formed the company, right? The CEO or the owner or the creator, right? They're basically saying, I have a legal separation, so you can't sue them, right? So say the company creates tires that light cars on fire and kill people. They're not, the person who owns the company, the shareholders and the CEO, they are not responsible for that unless there's some kind of intent or purpose found, right? You can sue the company, you can't sue the CEO of the company or the people who own shares in the company, right? It gives you that legal protection. And then on the flip side, they still pretend like corporations are people. So groups like Hobby Lobby then say, well, because we were founded by people with Christian values, we shouldn't have to follow the federal law when it comes to healthcare standards, which at the time included, I want to say, various forms of birth control, potentially abortions, things like that. So they wouldn't be able to prescribe any of those things. And the federal government was like, okay, you have a religious exemption. People have religious beliefs. Corporations are not people. So you should be required to give, like the corporation, the exchange should be that as an owner, I'm giving up some of my personal control and my personal beliefs to keep it protected from me being sued. So now it's its own entity, which is an entity, a legal entity, not a person entity. So no donations to campaigns because they don't have freedom of speech. We already regulate them far more than we can regulate people, with health standards, OSHA, all sorts of things, right? And they shouldn't have freedom of religion. The people inside certainly should. Right? If you don't want to take birth control, you don't have to. But if that's part of our federal culture that you agreed in, you're agreeing to abide by that in part by signing up for a corporation, right? That gives you that legal separation. That's not the case today. That's a dream of mine, but it should happen.
This is a sports and apparel company, and the basis of it for me is freedom. You have companies that are in that field who have made a conscious decision to either attack or undermine Christian values, conservative values and things like that. And I think that they have the free choice to do so, as much as I disagree. But I feel that we also have a freedom to create what we want to create.
Left to right, show me what you moving like. Feeling right, keep it moving side to side.
The hope is to be able to sign athletes across all different sports and to create a real infrastructure of people who are in the sports world, moms and dads who want to buy their kids sneakers and clothes, but want to give their money to a company that they know is going to work towards bolstering their values.
Ooh, ready to go, up in the way, moving the tide, starting the way.
We can be proud of what we believe in. We don't have to hide or be ashamed of it. As the day continues to get, darker.
They donate? It feels like this company is just kind of being advertised here, but I could see supporting that, right? Like if you believed in conservative ideas, right? It keeps this constant trend, and I know it's not unique to conservative ideology, but this constant trend of being attacked by, to me, it feels really strange. But since wokeism is so vague, especially from their side, right? It becomes very easy to basically use it as a boogeyman. Because there's a lot of things about Christian values that I think even liberal atheists like me can value, right? Like Jesus Christ, there's the story about him basically making the lame walk and the blind see and the sick be healthy, right? It's basically socialized healthcare. right? It's single payer, community oriented healthcare. The idea of even like churches coming together and helping out poor people and giving them food and donating to charities for folks who are under that kind of really desperate situation. I can get behind that. I have volunteered at churches in the past to do just those very same things. I think there are definitely groups of people who feel validly attacked on the left and have been for some time and historically have been. And then there are some people on the right who are legitimately being attacked, and it's valid. But the vast majority of the fight comes down to, it seems, an end result of selling people something. And that's really kind of disheartening. I was hoping that this would be more than that, like the answer to you selling people stuff under false pretenses of being under woke is that we sell people stuff under the false pretenses of it not being woke. Like, really? That's... I don't know. I keep my idea. I assume good intentions. I look for data. And I believe that no person should unnecessarily have to struggle or suffer. And if we kind of keep moving in those directions, I'm going to try and keep hopeful.
Darker and darker and crazier. You standing up for what you believe in is only going to get harder, but it's only going to become more and more necessary.
Roll the dice. Oh, you wanna try? Left to right. Hey, it's time to slide. Hey, one time. Hey, two times. Hey, oh my. Keep it moving side to side.
But it didn't end in sports. We all know the story. It felt like the flip of a switch, like every company in America was suddenly spouting the woke orthodoxy, and anyone who disagreed with them was ousted, condemned, and silenced. A perfect example? Amanda Ensing.
Who?
People love to complain about the culture and the environment, but they don't do anything. We need to be creating our own verticals and our own industries where
capital letters there, but it's okay. Here's a lawsuit, so let's see what it says. Okay, so she's in a lawsuit with Sephora. Got it. They stopped working with her I mean, they are a brand, and if they didn't feel like she was promoting their brand, a lot of times they have those in contracts. I'm not sure if she's going to win, like the Gina Carano thing with Disney, right? So Disney has these like morality clauses almost always in their contracts. So basically, if they don't like how you're representing their company, they can break contract with you at any time. A lot of these companies are pretty smart like that. I would not be surprised if Sephora had something like that. But I wonder if she won. In those regards, the courts will figure it out, and the law is too complex for someone like me. So the story is, we'll go with it. She was fought against by the woke mob. She rose up, and she is pushing forward.
We're competing.
What's her new brand? Does it have like called the boldness, uncancelable, faith over fear, unfollow me, she will not fall grace, fact check me? So, I mean, a sense of humor. This will definitely grab some people's attention and pull them over, right? Because they'll feel as if they relate to her and her scenario, and that they are also being prosecuted against. Smart.
This is Amanda Ensing. She's an entrepreneur, a beauty influencer, and a general badass boss lady. She started out beauty influencing with sponsorships from Sephora and other huge makeup brands. But when armchair critics started criticizing Amanda for stating her personal political beliefs, Sephora immediately canceled her sponsorships.
We saw some of them were not personal political beliefs. They were just literally, like the thing claimed, making light of essentially a pretty big issue, right? January 6th, she said there's not enough popcorn in the world for this, kind of sitting back and doing that. Everything else probably is fine, like being targeted or whatnot, but if that's the size of the lawsuit, it's not just for stating political beliefs, it's also for dismissing legitimate things going on, and a brand that is all about public perception, a cosmetics company, kind of probably doesn't want something that's ruining or tarnishing its public perception. But yeah, I mean, if it was illegal, she should win the lawsuit.
And went so far as to publicly condemn Amanda.
So for me, I was like, you know what? The beauty industry is in shambles. It only caters to one party, one set of views. Let's create my own brand. Our first launch sold out within like a day or two. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, what? And just seeing how much women wanted this, I was like, wow.
Just for a point of clarification, because I like nitpicking, just because you sell out on the first day doesn't really necessarily mean anything. I launched 3 different startups, and if you sell out, also it could be a sign that you didn't order enough, right? You didn't anticipate good enough, the large enough business. You may have only made 10. Who knows? I'm going to give credit where credit's due. They probably didn't do that, and it's probably a really large number that they sold out on. But just because someone says that doesn't, in and of itself, doesn't mean anything.
And I was scared. It's terrifying putting your story out there. And when you get canceled, and with all of these people now coming for me, it's scary at first to take that first leap. But once you do, you just don't stop. The alternative to people not creating these businesses is way worse than if you would take that leap of faith. Because I don't think a lot of people realize how willing Americans are to support you. Like, we are desperate for new brands and new companies.
America needs alternatives. Oh, and if you...
I know we're getting close to the end here, and this is kind of a common refrain, but we do need different brands. We need small businesses. We need actual, genuine, local small businesses to replace all of these big companies. We need to break up big tech. We need to be the anti-monopoly country that we were a long time ago, so that new brands can come in. And at the end of the day, as long as they don't have political power, as long as they're really small, right, they'd probably have less political power. Then I don't really care if they're conservative oriented or liberal oriented, because they'll just follow where the business is. And I do believe, right, this is why I'm liberal, I do believe that we're more often shooting in the direction of goodness than conservatives. I'm not going to say 100%. There's been a lot of liberal programs in the past that didn't manage to make, good progress or even do the right thing. But I will say, more often than the conservative side, we end up getting it right. And by right, I mean what's good for most people in the United States, the general working class, the poor, right?
If you haven't already guessed, every single one of the people we interviewed is a perfect example of not just what fighting back looks like, but what winning looks like.
They are all wealthy. That is for sure.
Well, I'll give you one of the insights from my investing days. It's a famous quote from Warren Buffett. Be brave where others are fearful. There is an economic opportunity. I think it might be one of the biggest economic opportunities of the next decade to serve the 100 million plus Americans, okay, who are badly disaffected from the places where they work, where they shop, where they bank, where they invest. These are also, from an economic standpoint, some of the best customers that any business could want. That is an economic opportunity. It might be the economic opportunity of our generation.
I just want to pause really quickly and kind of reiterate what he just said. He's saying that these people who feel lost are essentially loyal customers that you can take I shouldn't say take advantage of, that's a negative connotation, but you can certainly lead them to your product real easily because they're disaffected, because they feel like they're outcasts, right? It feels a little bit like taking advantage. And I'm not going to say that there's other corporations who would claim that they're liberal that aren't doing that, right? That's companies, what they do. But that seems like a major focus. There is a fight happening, a war, a culture war, if you may, from the conservative side of things. And the big inspiring moment right now was there's some money to be made by us, the people who have lots of money. It feels really not like the conclusion we want. So we've got another couple minutes. Let's see what it is. And let's take it home.
One person can't do everything, but each person can look themselves in the mirror and ask, how am I going to have my own unique contributions? For me, it's in the financial institutions, in the asset management industry, and in capital markets. Somebody else might be starting a consumer products company. Somebody else might be starting a new university. Somebody else might be starting a new mode or new approach to entertainment. Each of us is making our own unique contributions. And I'm pretty optimistic that together, it's a mosaic that drives that change through true diversity, that dilutes the church of diversity to irrelevance.
Over the last few years, we've seen woke activists try to infiltrate every area of society: education, entertainment and media, sports, and business. And for many of us, that seems daunting. But talking with people like Vivek Ramaswamy, Mike Farris, Jeremy Boring, Jonathan Isaac, and Amanda Ensing, we have proof that you can push back and make a cultural impact by providing alternatives. We know we're not going to change everybody's mind on these issues, and that's okay. The goal is to create a society where even if nobody's mind changed, we can all live together in a pluralistic, prosperous, civil United States. And I want to invite you on that journey.
This is a good message. I'm gonna go back a little bit here.
Even if nobody's mind changed, we can all live together in a pluralistic, prosperous, civil United States. And I want to invite you on that journey. Together, we can fight wokeism in academia, in the culture, in business. But It's not just about conservatives making alternatives for other conservatives. We need more people creating just flat-out good products, media, education, you name it. We need alternatives that are good for society and good for America. I'm ready to try. How about you? Thanks for watching this short documentary. Corporate wokeism is plaguing America, but as you just learned, there are lots of opportunities to fight back and win. For starters, please spread awareness by sharing this video. And most importantly, please sign the pledge to fight corporate wokeism and support unwoke alternatives. Together, we can create a parallel economy that has the power to save America. Take the pledge now.
Okay. So we started it with, why has everyone and everything gone woke? That's in the description, the title. And she, Amala does this, her story, her origin story, almost all the time. It builds credibility, right? Because she comes from the left. She knows how the left speaks, and now she thinks it's wrong. Why would someone think it's wrong unless they came up across some information? And that not only bolsters the conservatism which she's talking to, but it also might create doubt in some of the less grounded liberals that she might be talking to, right? And I don't even think that there's ill intent there. Again, I subscribe to assume good intentions. So she's telling this because she feels like it's important to share, right? We have a couple of mixed messages. Maybe the signs weren't chosen correctly, like, love in any shade, two gay men staying next to one another are considered versions of this evil wokeism. Black Lives Matter, systemic racism, and defund the police. Those she's going to have some more talking points about, where they're maybe not as clearly good as someone might think, or as clearly true as someone might think, right? So those are obvious signs that she would use, right? LGBT in clothing, that's woke. Drag queen story hour, that's woke. And by woke means bad. And it's in businesses, right? So she wants you to stop talking and take action. Action is not getting educated, because you don't go to academia unless it's Patrick Henry College, which people start private colleges all the time. By the way, it's not something people don't think can happen. There's other conservative colleges out there, other Christian colleges. But I can't find anything that says that it's a bad college for those things, if that's what you're looking for. But again, schools don't have to give report cards, essentially, which I think is bad regardless of the university. Even now, they should have like success ratios, like where people go, do they get jobs, how quickly do they get jobs, that sort of stuff. And they should all be free. Well, tuition free, because it's a common good, and then you can go wherever you want, right? People in academia, though, in the ivory tower, they're disconnected from the real world. They're bad. They come up with bad ideas. Wokeism, bad again. Marxism, bad. Identity politics, misunderstood by Vivek. I don't even know where he got the genetic stock part from. ESG, so environmentally social governments, bad for business, even though it does say, one of the reasons why BlackRock does it is because it like increases profits and sales and stuff, right? So there's a capitalistic reason for going with ESG, not a other perhaps nefarious motive, right? And that's excellence. If a company does better when it uses when it promotes ESG practices and promotes their ESG score, then that is exactly what Strive's going to find out, right? So then there's Strive management to try and come and do that. Do whatever you want with other people's money. It's fine too. But they position all of these bad ideas on that side as a fight. It's invading the conservative world, and we need to fight back. And we're going to fight back by watching Daily Wire, giving money to a big corporation. Well, maybe it's not so big yet, but another business unite us. Switching up our beauty product brands. Maybe the idea there is that you can look for other conservative brands. There's a ton of them out there, right? Like, mean, you can just do a search for conservative brands and you can find some. I guarantee you that as soon as they get big enough, they're just going to be a sore spot in the social structure anyways. They're going to remove power from people and try and just navigate gaining more profits. It's kind of what businesses do. That's how the government is. That's how the law is more or less set up to enhance profits. It's even what Vivek is in his book. He talks about like focusing on making profits as a corporation, not focused on doing good, right? So, entertainment industry used to be conservative. Now it's more liberal. I'll agree with that. There's definitely an economic opportunity. There are definitely people who feel disenfranchised by the fact that more people are becoming more liberal and more progressive, and they don't like it. And because they don't like it, they're going to buy products from people who also submit that, say that. So that's fine. But this end part is really bizarre because it's a hopeful statement, but it kind of goes against the entirety of the documentary. Up until this point, I'm like, hey, you've got the freedom to choose like what you want to watch, where you want to buy your stuff, right? I don't care. Do it, right? Most of the people are probably going to still just buy from Amazon because that's how entrenched Amazon is in the world, right? And most people are still going to go to like whatever college happens to be closer nearby. But if there's alternatives and you feel that it matches with your values, go. I really think that college should be a place that you go to have your beliefs questioned and to have that dialogue. And I get that that's becoming less and less of that place, and that by going and running off to a college that believes the same way as you do, you may actually be harming conservatism, or at least the strength of the good parts of conservatism, but it'll feel nice, right? But regardless, all of that stuff, a pluralistic, civil United States is not going to be possible if you just think and call everything that someone else does bad without providing any of that information. Now, I get that this is a short documentary, and I get that there are other videos where Amala goes into better detail, but as its own thing, just looking at the documentary, it looks like an advertisement for four particular brands that support conservatism, and kind of an awareness video that they have a brand, and also like a pro Vivek running for president, because I know that even Dennis Prager doesn't much like Trump, and so they're kind of looking for alternatives, right? That's what it feels like at the end of this. There wasn't a lot to dig in on. There wasn't any substance in this video, so I'm definitely going to do a different Amala video in the future. If anyone who watches this has a better video, like one where she really hits home with data, brings up ideas, and presents them, please let me know. I would love to have that video and have it be there. It's a little disheartening. Great production value, great video, great storytelling. But it does really feel like at the end that it's just an advertisement. It's the same thing that she's kind of complaining against, and I don't think it's intended. I hope it's not intended to be that way. I hope it's not intended to be nefarious and to go against all of the things that are being said throughout the video, and the one thing or two things that can be researched are incorrect. I'll leave it there.
This video is brought to you by Caffeine Zombies. Coffee's so good, it'll wake the dead.